We're so happy to have you here. We're so glad you can join us for our third and last information session of the year. And this is all about pathways for our Master of Translational Medicine program, trying to illuminate and give you a sense of where our alumni go on to work, what they go on to do, some of the data and trends of what we've seen in the past years. So you can go to the next slide, Moose.
And one thing I just wanted to throw out there is feel free to use the chat function as we're going on. We have both Stephanie and I will be monitoring that as we go on.
Yes. And for those of you who have been with us before, have been to an information session or connected with us, you probably already know me. I'm Stephanie Bianco. I'm the program coordinator. And a big part of my role is helping support students in their career development and professional development and growth and reaching their goals for whatever job they want to go on to pursue. And so that's been a really wonderful aspect of my job. And I feel like I've gotten to see a lot of the different directions and things that people are going on to. That's been really exciting. And it's been, a really fun aspect of my role. And I'll pass it on to Moose to introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. So I'm Moose O'Donnell. I'm the executive director of the program. You've probably seen my name on lots of emails that you get from us in general. And my role is really to oversee the whole program from the perspective of being two campuses. We have a faculty director at UCSF. We have people who teach our classes at Berkeley, but the students in the program need to be cognizant of the fact that they're at both campuses. So that's a big part of my role. And then we're joined today by Maria and Sam, who are two alums of our program. And they're going to give more of the specifics of their career paths. And they've taken very different career directions, and we're really excited to hear from them as we go on. We'll have them introduce themselves a little bit later.
Yeah, just to give you a sense of the agenda, what we're hoping to cover today, we'll start off with a little bit of data and trends on MTM Career Pathways, some general theory and background on the different pathways people go on to do. And then about halfway through the session, we'll have Maria and Sam jump in and introduce themselves and share their career stories. And then we'll give some time for Q&A where you can ask them questions. We can have a little bit of interaction with them. And then we'll round out with some of the ways that the MTM program and both campuses provide professional development opportunities and resources for our students. Go to the next slide. And one of the main goals of our program, one of the things we strive to do is to serve as a bridge for people, connecting where they've been with where they want to go and providing the scaffolding and structure to help people get from point A to point B, whatever that point B is that they define. And so that's one of the big drivers of what we do, what we aim to do as a program. And hopefully we'll give you a sense of how we support that in our talk today. One of the things that's so incredibly exciting about the program, and something that I love most about interacting with MTM students, is seeing the really diverse multitude of different paths and types of careers that students go on to take after the program. And it's just really inspiring to see the many ways that people are playing a role in medtech innovation and healthcare innovation in different ways, and living those kind of shared values that we have as a program of helping to improve healthcare, helping to improve access to healthcare. And one of the things that drives this really diverse set of different career pathways that we'll talk about in a moment is the diversity of our student body and the diversity of where our students are coming from and the experiences that they hold when they start the program. And so I'm going to pass it on to Moose to talk a little bit about who our students are and a little bit about the outcomes for some of them.
Yeah, thanks. I think that it's important to note that the outcomes our students go to are really influenced by where our students come from. And our students come from a variety of different backgrounds. If you look at this, the graph that I have showing, it's basically breaking our students' educational backgrounds, their undergraduate degree, into bioengineering, other engineering, life sciences, and specifically biology, biochemistry, neuroscience, and then clinical backgrounds such as medical, MD, RN, or the like. Excuse me. And what you see is that there's this common misconception that the MTM is about engineering, and that's really what we're looking for. Maybe that was true a decade ago, but really a lot of the growth in the program has come from students with life science backgrounds who recognize that they want to help people. Essentially, they want to have that sort of impact on patient outcomes, but don't necessarily want to do it through a traditional medical school background, or as you'll hear, maybe that is what they want to do, but they want to think about how to practice medicine differently. And so those roles those backgrounds that people come in with really influences the types of jobs that they're looking for later on. If someone's coming in with an undergraduate mechanical engineering degree, yes, they're more likely to go on to become an R&D engineer than is someone coming in with a biology background. There's a question that just popped up about MBA business backgrounds. That is not a rare thing. I don't remember where I shoved them. I think I stuffed them under other life sciences just because I didn't want the bars to be too messed up. But in pretty much every class, there's someone with what I call a just generally weird degree. That can be, and business is one of those. They make a convincing case why it's relevant, and they're certainly valuable in the program. It's not enough of them to warrant their own color on the graph, but absolutely, it's good training for a student coming in to try to make translational medicine happen. And if you go look at some of our previous info sessions, we talk about what we see as the process of healthcare innovation. And a big part of the point is it's not about engineering, and nor for that matter is it about medicine. It's about these people learning to work together. And oftentimes people with a life science background are great in the contextual roles of project management or product management, because they don't need to be doing the actual engineering. They just need to understand it well enough to supervise and get the most out of the engineers who are doing that work. And so there's all these different pathways that we're going to talk about. One of the things that's interesting is what students think they want to do coming into the program. And this is something that we consider in the admissions process. We look and say, wow, this student wants to do X, Y, Z. We don't actually think we're good training for that. But for students who really are describing a passion for healthcare innovation, we can say, yeah, that's something that our alumni go on to do. So this is a poll that we sent out to our alumni a couple of years ago. And what we have are these different categories of what do you want to do after graduation? You want to work in industry? Do you want to work in academia? Do you want to be a clinical practitioner? Do you want to go be a startup founder? And then do you want some sort of other role? And the vast majority of our incoming students think that they want to be in industry in some respect. That's the dark blue bar. What's interesting is a huge percentage, around a quarter of them, say they want to be in entrepreneurship. That's the bright green bar. And what we see when you then go look at their first job after graduation, a much larger percentage of them then said that's what they wanted to do, go work in industry. And this green bar, the number one work in entrepreneurship, actually drops at the first job out of school. But it then goes up a bit. It goes up a bit a year later, or a few years later. Most of these were 5 years out, were people who went and worked in an industry job for a couple of years and then felt comfortable moving into a very small startup where they had more of a role. I think a lot of people think that innovation is about entrepreneurship. The way to create something new in healthcare is you've got to start a company. And that's definitely encouraged by the undergraduate curriculum in engineering, which is very much about how do you go from the earliest concept to a product on the market. The reality is that especially in health innovation, it only takes one or two people to come up with an idea. It then takes dozens to hundreds or even thousands to bring that idea to market. And that is what we're trying to explain in the MTM, and it's what we're trying to train people for, is how do you be successful in those roles and really streamline that process. So it's not just about finding needs. Obviously, if you don't correctly identify the need, you're probably doomed. But even if you have a good idea, navigating the development process and the regulatory process and finding a way to get paid for your idea, all of those things are an incredible amount of work and take the sort of specialized training that we have in engineering, that we have in the MTM. And so that's where we think we're doing a very good job of training people to be entrepreneurs. But I don't want people to feel like that's what they have to see as the career outcome coming in. These industry jobs are really valuable. I think people work in all sorts of roles. We'll talk about that later. You also see the red bar in this graph is people working, getting additional education. And a decent number of people go into medical school out of the program. A very small number go on to PhD programs. And that does rise over the years. That we've had people who've been in engineering roles for 5 years out of the MTM suddenly decide that actually they really want to go to medical school. And that's where you get that sort of long-term growth in that red bar. I kind of hate this slide, but it's showing just the different career paths, showing that med tech is really the thing where we think we're mostly training people for. That's the second bar. It's about a third of our graduates go into medical technology. Another quarter go into biotech. And as I said in some of the earlier info sessions, we train people a lot in the process of developing medical devices, but we don't think medical devices are what translational medicine is, just that they're a really good learning experience. You can learn things on medical device projects faster than you could learn them in a biotech project, but the lessons are very portable. Once you understand the process of getting a new product into a market, you understand the sort of work you're going to have to do, whether it's a device or a drug. Digital health is kind of is an overlapping thing. A lot of that might also be in med tech, and it's a growing percentage of our alumni are working in areas that are related to digital health. Consulting is another area that a lot of MTM graduates go on to do, be that in sort of specialty regulatory consulting roles, which you'll hear about from Maria, or in general life science consulting, where what we hear from these sort of companies is if they want to advise clients on setting strategy in a health technology industry, they need people who understand the concepts of flow of money through the health system and regulatory processes that we're teaching within the MTM. So there's a lot of paths within these different sectors. If we even just look at the industry sector and go to that med tech, med devices block that is sort of the most common amongst our graduates, there's lots of different roles. And I think many people emerge from an undergraduate program thinking about their role either as an individual contributor, where they're the person designing this piece that will actually make this happen. They're the one who's going to diagnose the disease, or they think of themselves in sort of a leadership role. They're going to be the entrepreneur, the CEO who starts the company. What I really like to highlight is these context support roles, I like to call them. And these are critical, they're underappreciated. The most obvious one in healthcare is regulatory areas. So everyone thinks about designing a product, and many people then think, and then after that, you go get your regulatory clearance to put that on the market. The reality is that if you're successful medical entrepreneurs are thinking about that early on, they're bringing in either very good consultants or bringing people in-house who have some awareness of that. And those people are integral to the design, because if you don't think about your regulatory path as you're designing, you're likely designing in things that are going to make it very difficult to navigate the regulatory process later. If you think about, here, pop these up, quality engineering. Another part of the regulatory process is ensuring that the products you produce are of homogeneous quality throughout your process. That's an essential engineering role that almost no one goes to graduate school thinking, I want to be a quality assurance engineer, or I want to be a risk assessment engineer. And yet, if you want to work in a highly regulated environment like healthcare, those become essential. We mentioned preclinical marketing was something Stephanie mentioned earlier. That's another area where MTM graduates have been very successful at being the bridge between clinicians and design teams. So preclinical marketing is a term in the industry where you don't actually have a product on the market, but you're building the relationships with the customers that will help inform your product pipeline. It's a great role for MTM students because it requires an understanding of the process you're informing, but also an understanding of what matters to the clinical workflows that you're trying to appreciate and explain. So there's a lot of these roles where entrepreneurs, small companies often fail to appreciate that you don't just get 3 good engineers in a room and design a product and assume that the healthcare system is going to flock to your door and change their processes and procedures to give you a lot of money. Instead, you really need to understand that process, and you need people who are really devoted to the actual work of translation. It doesn't happen automatically. That's really what we're trying to teach in the MTM program. And it's what we hear over and over again from people. This is where our graduates are adding a lot of value. So thinking about the positions our alumni end up in, more and more of them are moving into sort of management and leadership roles. And I'll note that if you added up all the percentages, they'd be way over 100%, because if you're a managing engineer, you would check 2 boxes. The largest number are in engineering roles, but that's by no means the majority. It's by no means what we expect our graduates are going into. As we watch people's careers, they're moving more into these senior roles. About 8% are in a founder role. Again, this is pretty typical, and it's, I think, about the right number. I would actually be concerned if too many of our people were in founder roles, because it indicates we're just training people to be at the early stage, and we're not spending enough time training people in the other important roles that need to be done. And a decent number, around 20-25%, end up in clinical roles. Either they were a MD resident, medical resident when they came into the program, or they go to medical school afterwards. And like I mentioned, a very small number go on to get PhDs, fewer than 5% go on to get PhDs, but it is definitely a pipeline for some people. So those are just some overviews of the different job descriptions you might see in MTM alumni class. Now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie to talk about some common industry pathways and job titles.
Yeah, so let's drill down another layer and kind of give some more shape to the types of the actual job titles and roles that a lot of students go on to. So we're going to cover a few different pathways here. One of them that's become very popular, especially in the past 3-4 years, is product management, which is kind of sits at the intersection of business, technical product design, and user needs finding and user research to really drive the strategy and product development. And actually, you'll hear from a product manager in a little bit, Sam Seymour, about his role. Maybe he can help give some more detail to that. But some of the job titles that people go on to in product management are associate product manager. That's a really good entry-level role. We've seen a lot of recent grads go on to those roles. Product manager, upstream product manager. Product managers do lots of different things in different contexts. So there's a really broad range of different roles there. And another area or pathway is technical, which Moose has talked about, the R&D engineers. Clinical engineering is also a great fit for MTM students, having to understand the clinical workflows and work with clinicians and be able to, work on the engineering side as well. So that's been a really interesting and great role for MTM students. Some of our students also go on to be data scientists, software engineers, human factors engineer. You can see there's a broad range of different titles kind of in that technical space of like building the systems, building the algorithms, building the products that are actually used. Another big area is clinical research. It's determining the safety and efficacy of different products and drugs, which is a multi-year process for almost every single product that is developed. And so it's a really important part of the translational process. And a lot of our grads have gone on to work in this space as clinical research coordinators, managers, clinical operations managers, clinical trial managing too. And again, this is an area that a lot of people don't really know much about and get exposure to through the program and learn that it's a great fit for them and the type of role they want to play in the translational process. Another area that Moose talked about that's common and popular for MTM students is consulting. Being the person that clients come to get, advice on the strategy, the positioning, the marketing, the regulatory strategy of a product or device or a diagnostic. And so, a lot of our MTM graduates go on to be analysts, senior analysts, consultants, or engagement managers at consulting firms. Another area that's been really interesting, and I've seen more kind of movement towards this for some of our graduates, is medical affairs. And these are the people that serve as the bridge between doctors and companies to communicate what a product is, what it aims to do. I think it's especially popular in pharma, but it's a great role for clinicians who want to be a part of the medical innovation process in a different sort of way. So some of our grads have gone on to be medical affairs managers, medical advisors, medical science liaisons, and work in medical communications as well. And as Moose mentioned, a percentage of our students go on to found their own companies. In the 10 years that our program has been around, we've seen about 13 companies be founded and see pretty great success from those. That's really exciting. Every single year, students come in with an idea of something they want to pursue and sometimes use the MTM as a springboard for that project or idea. And sometimes a few years after the MTM program, after they've gained some industry exposure, they decide to go on to found their own companies. And all of those are different ways that we see students kind of navigating their own career journeys and when the timing is right for them. Another area that Moose mentioned is regulatory and quality, a really, really important and critical aspect of medical and device tech innovation. And so some of our students go on to be regulatory affairs specialists, regulatory affairs associates, quality engineers, and work in quality assurance as well. And the last sort of area or pathway is marketing and sales. Like without a product that you can market, there's not much that can be done. So marketing and sales is a really critical part of the process as well. And we've seen our students go on to be marketing managers, growth marketers, business development associates, marketing associates, a wide range of roles in that sort of area or pathway. So hopefully this just gives you a sense of just how broad the spectrum is of the types of roles students go on to and the many different ways they impact medical innovation. So as Moose mentioned before, too, giving a sense of the diversity of backgrounds that our students come in with, you might wonder, if I come in with a certain background, what are the sorts of roles I could expect out of the program? And so here's an example of some of the first jobs that our MTM graduates have gone on to who come in with an engineering undergrad degree. Let's say you're finishing up your engineering degree and you decide to come to the MTM right after. What are some of the first jobs that we see? One, clinical engineer at Abbott. Another one, R&D engineer at Theranova, systems engineer at Roche, product manager at Nefrosant, which is a small startup, regulatory affairs specialist at Experian Group. So we see that even with this common background of engineering, there's a pretty wide range of different roles. Some of them are technical engineering roles, some of them are in product management, one in regulatory affairs. So, even though the degree that you come in with, the background that you come in with does, drive in part what you go on to do, you can see there's still a really broad range of different things that people with the same background go on to do. You can go on to the next slide. So let's take another example of someone who comes in with a life sciences undergrad. What are some of the ranges of jobs that they go on to do straight out of the program with this background? Business process analyst at Genentech, life sciences management consultant at Corral Group, product manager at Biorad Laboratories, senior research associate at Gilead, data science at KitCheck. So again, we see a really broad range of roles and a range of different types of companies too. I think that's another interesting thing that I'll touch on a little bit later. But you see some crossover, even, like some of the engineering students come in and go on to product management, but that's the same. We see kind of a convergence happen too of some people with life sciences also go on to product management. So I think that's a really interesting sort of trend to pull out as well. And the last example we'll give is for people who come in with a clinical background. A lot of people take, a year during their residency or between, med school and their residency, or even come back after practicing medicine for many years and want to pivot. And so some people who come in with this clinical background go on to work in the medical affairs space, as I mentioned, medical affairs liaison at Mendel AI, medical affairs manager at Sonendo, co-founder of Voyage Biomedical. We see a lot of our clinicians take on more clinician innovator roles. Another example is clinical specialist at Arteris, and this person eventually went on to be in product management as well. And another example is engagement manager at Health Advances. These are just a few examples, like following, this many people, what they've done right after the program. Hopefully it gives you just a sense of the range and breadth of the different roles. And in the same way that the types of roles that they go on to, our students go on to are really broad, the same story applies with the companies that employ MTM graduates. We see everything from, multinational large companies like Stryker and Genentech to really small startups, boutique consulting firms to really big strategy consulting firms like McKinsey. Lots of, startups like Hinge Health is a digital health startup. We also see, governmental agencies like the FDA, institutions like Stanford and UCLA, higher education institutions where research is happening. So again, a really broad range and just a small sampling of the types of companies that MTM grads go on to work at. And as someone who's interested in maybe applying for the program or thinking about the program, might be interested to know what our job placement rates are. And so I wanted to share some data from the most recent class of 2021. And so we found that 77% of them accepted full-time job offers within 6 months of graduating. And another 12% went on to continue their education. Medical school, one person went on to study management consulting, strategy management consulting. So there's different kind of one-off cases of people continuing their education, a lot of people going on to medical school, but that's just a sense of job placement rates for our students of the most recent graduating class. And so we've given a lot of kind of big picture trends, ideas, pathways for some of our MTM graduates. I'm going to pass it off to Moose, who's hopefully going to make this a little more tangible with some real stories from some of our alumni.
Yeah, absolutely. And really our goal is to let our alumni tell their stories. So we have two of our alumni joining us, and I think there are two who have gone on into some of those really important roles that we talked about. So Maria de Azevedo-Cram is a program lead at Experian Group. Sam Seymour is a senior product manager at Page. I'm going to have both of you spend about 5 minutes just telling your story, and then really want to dive into some Q&A. So I'd love to see people throw questions in the chat as you're listening to Maria and Sam tell their story, and then I'll curate the questions and ask them. So Maria, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Moose. So hi, as Moose said, my name is Maria de Azevedo-Cram. I graduated from the MTM program in 2019, which seems weird to think about now considering all that's happened since 2019, but that's true. I joined the MTM program straight out of college. So I did my undergrad in health sciences, which is a more general pre-med type program. And similarly, going into university was kind of thinking med school, but was still really interested in the healthcare field and not really sure if I wanted to be on that side of the patient, of the bedside. And so I kind of looked around and saw the MTM program, became very interested in the medical device industry. And so that's why I decided to join. And through my time at MTM, in hearing the speakers talk and learning about the industry, networking, things like that, and kind of assessing how I wanted my career to continue. One of our speakers was the company that I currently work at, which is Experian Group. And I was really drawn to their company, the type of work that they do, which is regulatory quality and clinical consulting for medical device companies. So I started out as a business development associate. I also spent some time in regulatory as a consultant. And now I'm the program lead in business development, working closely with our business development team, and also managing a lot of the internal resource tracking, especially since our company just got acquired by a larger company called Veranex, which is a larger end-to-end consulting services company. So they've acquired a couple of R&D engineering design development firms. They've acquired a reimbursement firm, data management, things like that. And so I'm happy to talk about all of those areas in general, what our company does, and also how that can relate to an MTM degree.
Great, thank you, Maria. How about Sam? Let's hear your story.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and speak to my perspective on MTM and career since then. So welcome everybody. So I studied biology at a small liberal arts school in undergrad, and worked as a lab rat in research in academia and pharma. And for a variety of reasons, would say I became somewhat disenchanted with sort of those two worlds. And I think Moose and Stephanie wanted us to talk a little bit about kind of linearity versus non-linearity in careers. And so I'll jump the gun there and say, my career journey is very nonlinear. And I think, many folks who may portray their career journeys as very linear are sort of putting a nice spin on it. Sounds like Marie and I both sort of went through the next step of my journey, which was I want to go to med school, and then sort of realizing you don't have to go to med school necessarily to be an innovator in healthcare. As all of the data Moose and Stephanie just showed kind of backs up, it takes an army to be innovative in healthcare. And so I found MTM serendipitously living in the Bay Area and participated in the program, graduated in 2016. And since then have worked in a variety of startups, starting with I was employee 8 at a tiny little startup in an old real estate office, kind of outside the Bay Area, working as a jack of all trades in operations. And went from there to another startup, more established, well-funded in San Francisco, working to automate and assist with preparing medical notes, helping primary care physicians do that. And then since then have been at 2 small to medium startups, working in medical imaging AI, trying to help radiologists and pathologists identify findings in medical images and to diagnose. So in my last role, I've sort of been in a variety of operational roles, but ultimately I've parlayed that into a product management role, which really is sort of a jack of all trades position in my experience. So I'll stop there, but I'm happy to answer questions and go on.
That's fantastic. Thanks, both of you. One of the questions I guess I'll throw out to both of you is looking for an example of where something you learned in the MTM program has really had an impact on your career right now, and something that you might reflect back and say, oh yeah, that I can see how this thing I do in my career is influenced by that year in the MTM.
I can start. Yeah, mine was a very direct line, aka the lecture that Experian Group gave helped me get my current job, and I needed to use all that information throughout my time here at Experian Group. So Experian Group had taught the regulatory session, so outlining, how FDA works for a device specifically. There's similar but slightly different protocols for pharma products and biologics, but they outline the whole process, kind of the basics of how to put together a regulatory strategy when you're assessing your own device or your own product. And all of that information was the foundation for what I needed as part of my career at Experian Group in consulting and business development, because I needed to speak on those things on a daily basis. So that was a direct line from what I learned in the MTM program.
Fantastic, thanks. And Tim, how about you?
Well, so I think, I mentioned being a jack of all trades. I think for me, MTM is pervasive for me every single day in having to sort of consolidate every possible sort of angle. So from clinical to research to reimbursement to product strategy. So, sort of a generic answer, but on a macro scale, MTM is influencing me every day. More specifically, I think learning that regulation, and Maria can talk to this much more so than I can, but regulation is not something to be feared. We went through a lot of discussions of this and got a lot of training in regulatory science and exposure to it, and really realizing that it's there for a purpose and a good reason and can actually work to your advantage. That was a learning that I am taking and practicing every single day.
And actually, to follow up on that, and obviously this is maybe a little more relevant, surprisingly, to Sam than to Maria, but to what extent is the level of learning about regulatory you got in the program, how has it been how has it matched your needs in industry? And obviously, Maria, you need to know everything about regulatory as a regulatory consultant, but for you, Sam, and I guess Maria also be interested to hear where you felt as you started the consulting job about your level of experience. But also, Sam, when you're needing regulatory knowledge in your current job or your previous jobs, how has that felt?
Yeah, the companies I've worked at, especially in the medical imaging AI startups, were kind of operating, I think, at the bleeding edge of regulatory science. So MTM has, I think, really set me up for understanding how to sort of navigate that edge. Where are things sort of hard and fast and fixed from a regulatory perspective versus sort of indicative of the way regulators are thinking, and where we might need to actually be sort of very careful and considerate of engaging regulators and more deliberate in terms of sort of interpreting guidance and things like that. So, MTM can't predict the future and decide sort of how regulators are going to function in the future, but it can at least set you up to navigate uncertainty in the future.
Fantastic. How about you, Maria?
Yeah. And I would also add another area that I've seen regulatory make an impact that not necessarily when you're doing regulatory consulting is marketing. And then also in like mergers and acquisitions. So I'll touch on kind of both. So in marketing, if you need to say certain things about your device in order for that device to get sold, or if you want to say this is going to cure cancer or, be the next moon dust or whatever it is, you're going to have to prove that to the regulatory body through your clinical trials, your evidence, your benchtop testing. And so if you let your marketing or kind of and it's good to have aspirational claims to say this is what we're going to shoot for. But if you can't get the clearance or you can't prove or get it approved in the country that you want to sell it in, then it doesn't matter what you say about your device, you can't sell it or you won't be able to use it on patients. And so that's one aspect where kind of business marketing goes right hand in hand with regulatory, because you want to make sure that you can substantiate all the claims and the labeling that you want to make, that you want to say to your doctors or to the hospitals or whoever you're selling to. And then the other side is mergers and acquisitions. And you'll kind of maybe get exposed to some of this through the MTM program, where you can kind of network with some accelerators and incubators and things like that. But one thing that investors really look for is not that you are some sort of regulatory expert, but do you know your general regulatory pathway? Can you speak intelligently on those things? You know the difference between a 510K and a de novo and a PMA pathway, those types of things that can help provide confidence in you, your team, your company, and your device that I've seen can make the difference basically in investing or not in certain companies.
Fantastic. That is great. Yeah, I often joke that we're not going to make you an expert, but we'd like you to be able to come out of the program and sit in a meeting and not look stupid. And that does seem like it's a relevant bar for this, that if you're not asking dumb questions, then you'll probably look smarter than the other people in the room. So yeah, very much appreciate that. Scott, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, sounds good. First of all, thank you both for coming on today and sharing your story and your experience in MTM and your career path today. So my question was, what sort of advice would you give to someone going into the MTM program that would make your journey to where you are today easier?
After you, Maria.
Yeah, sure. Or if you have an answer, you can go ahead, but I think...
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll buy you some time. I actually thought about this one yesterday. Networking. I think so much of what people talk about with MBAs applies to MTM as well. For me, at least, and sort of the way I wanted to steer my career. The Bay Area, for any of you who live there, you already probably know this, is such a hub for innovation. And there are endless opportunities to go out into the community and leverage the student card to get into places that might be harder, especially as a non-student. So I would say network like crazy, and spend your evenings going to info sessions and demo days and all that sort of stuff. It is such a great way to learn and sort of absorb the Bay Area's sort of energy and innovative vibes.
Yeah, Sam, that's an excellent answer. And I think I would say the same. I think the reason we say this often is because I think depending on your personality, your style, how you network, what types of networking events are available during your year just changes, but it is a key part of the program because I think the program, as Moose said, it's to kind of give you enough information so that you know what you're talking about. But depending on your personal background and where you want to go, you can definitely dive a lot deeper through your own learning, through your own networking, and et cetera. So I think the networking factor is, if you think you want to be a product manager, you want to be a regulatory associate, or, then go to events that can cater to those, talk to people who are in those current roles, and maybe you'll get hired after the program, or maybe you'll just at least learn more about the industry and then decide if that is actually something you want to pursue. If there's something else interesting that pops up that you're like, I never thought about that job before, that type of technology, I would really be interested in working in that space. And I think that can help guide you throughout the program too, because then you can tailor, okay, I met this person who was a clinical research associate. So now, and I know our clinical presenters coming in, I can ask a lot more detailed questions about something that was really interesting about that role.
Can I add maybe one more piece of advice, and this might be a little more philosophical, but I think that there's, for a variety of reasons, students in grad school are often asked by people they might be doing informational interviews with, or actually interviewing with, companies they might be interviewing with, like, who are you and what do you want? And I think balancing the perspective of committing to a pathway, sort of so you can tell a story and sort of fit yourself into somebody's model of the world, versus maintaining an open mind. Or I think those are two very different things and difficult, but sort of putting on different hats there. So not being afraid to say to somebody who is there more sort of to support you, I don't know what I want to do. Tell me what you like about your current job, or what you don't like about your current job. What has your career journey been like? Versus somebody who you're actually trying to maybe get an interview with, or are interviewing with, saying to them, I am a product manager and here's why I'm a PM. It sometimes can feel a little duplicitous, but I think sort of acknowledging that outright can be pretty helpful.
Got it. Yeah, thank you both so much.
And I'll follow that up. First of all, I want to say thanks for the question, Scott. And if anyone else has questions, please either raise your hand or type them in the chat. But I'm going to follow that up too with a corollary to that, which is a major part of the career value of the MTM comes in the stories you can tell on the way out the door. And so you gain a lot of experiences in your capstone project. You pick up ideas from classes that you can talk about in job interviews. And you start to learn the language of different roles, so you can do what Sam is talking about and say, hey, I see myself as a project manager, because I would say that 50 to 75% of the students in the MTM program at some point in their time say, I'd like to be a PM. And then turns out they do not know the difference between a project manager or a program manager or a product manager. And because of that, we've actually started to have some dedicated sessions on exactly that question, because, and it's not just MTM students, I would say that is very common amongst recent college graduates, is they think, PM sounds like a great job. But I would say that the thing I would recommend is do as much as possible. There are organizations you can get involved with through the hospital business, their healthcare association. A substantial number of MTM students get together and start their own project that's parallel to what they're doing in the capstone, and try to develop a totally new medical device. Most of those go nowhere, but more than one has at least made progress after the MTM. And doing those sort of things just provides more of these experiences that you can use in a job interview later to say, oh, actually, I did have some experience working on that with a team. We were trying to develop XYZ, and we had to solve a problem similar to what you're asking about. So I'm always kind of amazed by people who come into a one-year program and don't quite yet have the mindset. It's probably more typical of students who are straight out of undergrad who feel like, there's always another year. And for the students who dive in and say, I've got 10 months to get as much of this out as I possibly can, they may sleep less, but I think they do often walk away with just this host of experiences that can really help them out down the road. Another question, Maria, I'd like to hear a bit about your life as a consultant. Like, what does that actually mean? I know a lot of students come in thinking they want to be a consultant, but I think what they're talking about is they want the lots, frequent flyer miles and prestige that comes with it, and not necessarily thinking about like, what is the day-to-day of this?
Yeah, so the day-to-day changes all the time. So generally, I can talk about Experience Group's model, which is we help medical device companies develop their regulatory strategies, clinical strategies, quality strategies, and then also execute on them. So if you need a pre-submission package written, a 510(k) submission written, if you need quality engineering support, document control support, running a clinical trial. So Experience Group does all of those things. And so if you were to be a regulatory associate, a quality engineer, or even a clinical research associate, which are kind of the general, I would say entry level almost, positions in the 3 departments, you'd be assigned a variety of projects from a variety of different clients. And so it comes down to a lot of time management, but also a lot of managing expectations and deadlines while keeping a general steady flow of work going. So there could be a day where you completely dedicate to one client, one project, or there could be a day where you're in 5 different meetings explaining what you've done the past week to 5 different clients. And then you still have to work on, 5 other different clients' projects because you're trying to keep on top of multiple submissions, multiple strategies, different things that come up throughout the day. So there can be, slower, more like consistent periods where you're working on one big project for a longer period of time. So those would be like more bigger submissions, clinical evaluation reports, things like that. Or it could be you're on 20 different projects, but you only need to do 2 hours of work on each of those projects that week. And so that's just kind of how it can end up being.
Excellent. And a slightly comparable question for you, Sam. You mentioned about the many different companies you work for at different sizes. And I think these are also things that people have misconceptions about. And when they think startup, they think foosball table in the office and free kombucha or whatever. But you've worked at different size companies. And can you give a little bit of a perspective of what you get out of different levels of startup and different companies at different stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple answer is it depends, and I would not, just putting on that hat of sort of not having to know who you are and what you want. Like, I stay open to lots of different sizes of companies because every company has a different culture. But with that said, there are, of course, general trends, and I think the more within a product role, the more a company grows, the more you have, or the larger a company is, the more you have supporting resources to get things done and people who are more experts in the various things that you touch. So 8-person startup where I was running operations, I was responsible for overseeing a team of 2 or 3 who wrote papers for submission and conducted research, and was also literally writing our 510(k), even though I had an interpreting regulatory guidance for software as a medical device and clinical decision support that I had no business actually doing independently, but we had no budget for consultants. Versus a company now that has grown to about 150. We have somebody who is quite a name in the regulatory landscape, at least from my perspective, knows exactly what he's doing. We have mostly MBAs who are sort of leading some BD and marketing in strategic discussions, and I get to consult on that and help them, but I'm not responsible for it. And we have a whole separate research arm that again, I sort of consult on. So they practically day to day, they mean different things. And also in terms of sort of the way that maybe you fit in can mean different things, and the way that it sort of impacts your life can mean different things. Smaller companies will oftentimes be much more demanding on your time, to be frank. So yeah, budget for consultants, says Moose. Yeah, budget for consultants. I wish Maria had been there when I was writing that 510K.
Yeah, I mean, you pay for what you get for you pay for it in your own time, right? So, there's definitely independent consultants that are much cheaper than a firm like ours, which is a more mid-sized versus the giant Emergos of the world. But budgeting for consultants, that's a good thing to keep in mind for startups, especially if you can't hire a person to do that work.
We just have a couple minutes left, and I'd like to close with a question of kind of what was on our slide. How does your plan when you entered the MTM program compare to where you are now?
I would say completely different for me. I kind of went into the MTM program like, oh, product management, project management, those types of roles sound really nice, really interesting. But then in kind of exploring other options and hearing from all these speakers, it was like, I'm just going to apply to a bunch of roles, interview for as many as I can, see how I feel about the process, the job descriptions, all that kind of stuff. And landed at Experian Group in a way that I was like really surprised about, but I definitely wouldn't change that process now looking back, for sure.
Fantastic. How about you, Sam?
So I'd say I was one of those people who went into MTM and as a thinking product management, and actually sort of ultimately moved into product management. But I would say that that did not happen as quickly as I thought. And as much as any education can prepare you for things, including MTM, the reality of going to market with a healthcare solution and the way a company expands and changes with that is
whoops, looks like we lost Sam. I think one thing about no matter what you can learn in education, you have to be prepared for the unexpected when your Zoom call suddenly kicks you off. So I think we're going to wrap up there. I just want to say thank you to Maria, and we'll thank Sam and off in the ether somewhere. This is super helpful, and I hope this has helped give you prospective students a little bit of a vision of what your life might be like a year or a few years from now with the MTM behind you. Now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And
Sam's back.
Oh, Sam's back.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't going to say anything important, so
that's all right. I was saying that you showed that you have to be prepared for the unexpected, and just wanted to say thanks so much. That was incredibly helpful to both of you. So thanks again. And now I'm going to switch it back to sharing and go on to Steph to talk about a sense of the structure and support you'll receive.
Yeah, so thank you again. I just want to say thank you to Sam and Maria too. It's so nice to have you here, hearing your stories, hearing the unexpected, very, very real experiences. I really appreciate you sharing that. So just to wrap things up, I want to give a sense of, like Moose said, the structure, the scaffolding that we provide as a program and that you'll get at both campuses in order to help you along your career journey and in your professional development. So we can go to the next little part, I think. So one thing that's hugely important is our program is growing. We're now to over 250 plus alumni, and we create all sorts of opportunities for you to engage with them, to network with them, to get mentorship from them. And these are people that have been where you are, who have navigated this whole process and are insanely helpful to all of our students in their career journey. So that's a huge aspect of what we do in career services. Another thing is we offer a whole suite of different professional development workshops, from like personal branding on LinkedIn to behavioral interview prep to resume support to all sorts of different things that we do to try to help you enter into situations where you're networking, where you're interviewing with confidence. We offer a lot of alumni and industry panels and chats. This is kind of a continuation of that first point, where we give you a lot of opportunities to interact with people. And a lot of your speakers in your classes are industry experts in their areas. And so even in your class, there's a lot of rich opportunities to learn more about a certain space, to network, to really get exposure to the bleeding edge, as Sam said, of these different areas. We host a Design Your Life workshop series early on in the year for students who'd like to participate, all about kind of using design thinking as a framework for thinking about how you want to get the most out of the MTM program. So that's a new pilot that we launched this year that was really, really great and well received. Another thing that I touched on a little bit before is we have small groups who gather around particular interests or affinities. And so these are self-defined interest groups from students. And then we pair those small groups with alumni mentors who work together throughout the year to get guidance on their career development, on a certain space, on the cutting edge of technology. And so these year-long mentorship programs have been really, really effective and helpful for students in their professional development. We offer one-on-one coaching, individualized kind of planning with students who want to go in different directions and need help getting from point A to point B.
I just want to jump in and comment on that's more than just while you're a student in the program. Some of that extends beyond. I probably every couple of weeks get a call from a former MTM student who's saying, hey, I'm contemplating this career direction, and can I just bounce some ideas off of you? And the network you build within your own cohort, I think we hear over and over again that those are the start of their core professional network, the people they really trust to ask dumb questions of. They can say, hey, I'm thinking of this, does this make sense? And they know that the MTM alums who were there with them 3 years ago, 4 years ago, are still willing to be part of that one-on-one discussion about their career plans.
Mm-hmm. Great point. We also offer grants to attend conferences, pursue certifications, things that you want to do to help build skills and, kind of fill the gaps in your own professional development to help you continue growing. The Fung Institute at UC Berkeley, which MTM students are all kind of fall under the umbrella of the Fung Institute. And the Fung Institute, administers the MEng program and also operates the boot camps that MTM students participate in. They're pre-semester, really intensive courses based on case studies. But the Fung Institute also offers a whole suite of career services that MTM students have access to. A lot of the same sort of services that me and Moose provide: one-on-one coaching, resume critiques, salary negotiation support, interview prep. You can see kind of the wide range of different things. And a lot of students take advantage of, not one, but many resources across these campuses to help them in their growth. And this is just to give you a sense of the resources, just a couple of resources on both campuses. So as a student at UCSF and UC Berkeley, you have access to resources on both campuses. The Fung Institute I mentioned, there's also just a whole suite of other, there's career centers on both campuses. There's tons of support for entrepreneurship. There's incubators, there's accelerators. There's the Haas Healthcare Association, which is a really, really amazing student-run, business-focused student organization. There's the Jacobs Institute, a makerspace on campus where you can go gain skills in prototyping and manufacturing and building. There's the Consulting Club at UCSF, which practice case studies together, the Pediatric Device Consortium. All of these are just, like I said, the tip of the iceberg in terms of the resources that students take advantage of to get the most out of the 10 months that you're in the program. So even though our students go on to take on really diverse roles in healthcare, what brings everybody together is really this passion, this deep-seated passion for helping people, for improving healthcare. And it's something that's really inspiring. My favorite part of my role is seeing all the many ways our students go on to live this mission together in different sorts of ways. Go to the next slide. And even though we don't know many of you yet, we hope to get to know you better. And we know that many of you have so many amazing experiences and perspectives to contribute to this area. And so I just wanted to do a quick plug, a reminder that applications for the program are due January 6th. And if you have questions at any point in time, please don't hesitate to reach out to either me or Moose or this mtm@berkeley.edu email. And we're happy to help you with any part of the process or tell you more about the program.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. And one last thing I want to leave with is this notion that there are a lot of careers that MTM students go into, but none of it's automatic. And it's not as if you sign up for the program and we'll give you a list of the jobs you might get at the end of it. Our most successful students work really hard, but they do it in such a way, I think for most of them, it's enjoyable. Sam talked about networking, and I think that's one of the most effective ways you can accelerate your career. And if done properly, it can be really fun. You're talking to people who have, as Stephanie was mentioning, a shared mission. They're excited about healthcare, and you're excited about healthcare, and you're having a conversation with them that seems like you're talking about something content oriented, but really that's the sort of professional conversation that can lead to career opportunities down the road. So all of these resources that we've talked about require active participation and really throwing yourself into. And those are the students who do that are the ones who just have these amazing job opportunities right out of the program, are the ones who are taking advantage of as many of these things as possible. So we love to put out all of the career opportunities and all of the different resources we have to help. And we're super excited to have students come into the program and make use of them. So with that, I'd like to thank Sam and Maria. Thank you again for your time and for participating. And that's the end of our planned session. We're happy to stay here and take any questions if you have them.
Thank you all so much. Happy holidays if you celebrate them.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for the great question too.
Thanks, Miss. I'm going to hop off as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye, Maria. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Care, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, Sam. Thank you.
Of course, of course.
Looks like most folks have left. Does anyone who's left have any questions? Any outstanding questions?